Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and thank you for joining me for another true crime video. Today we are talking about the still unsolved disappearance of 6-year-old Morgan Nick, who went missing from a Little League game in Alma, Arkansas in 1995. And I think it's really important to talk about this case today because recently, after a local documentary was made about Morgan's abduction, the still open investigation has been given a new breath of air. And I want to help keep that momentum going because Morgan's family has never stopped looking for her. They've never stopped holding on to hope that they can bring their little girl home one way or another, even after 26 years. But before we dive in, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, one of my favorite sponsors, Native. First of all, let me show you this. I don't know if you can read it. You probably can. But it says, take care of your body. It's the only place you have to live. Can I just say I love this? I love this. So true. And that is what Native is all about. Native believes in creating personal care products that are better for your body. That's why their products are free of parabens, sulfates, and aluminum. Instead, they're made with simple and familiar ingredients like coconut oil, shea butter, and tapioca starch. They're also vegan and cruelty-free. I love Native products so much. I know you probably, some of you don't believe me because this is like a sponsored ad. I love them, especially their deodorants and their body washes. In fact, when I ran out of deodorant in Austin, when I was there for CrimeCon, I walked 10 minutes in the scorching Texas heat to the nearest Target, and I bought me some Native deodorant and body wash. And I met a subscriber from Austin when I was in Target that day, so I'm really happy I took the trip. But anyways, Native's deodorants are non-sticky. They're fast drying. All you need is a few swipes. Less is more. You'll be smelling fresh all day long, even after the intense summer heat or a day of sitting in front of these hot lights recording a video, because trust me, I glisten a lot while I'm sitting in front of these lights. They also have a wide range of scents, including seasonal scents, like these 3 that have just been released for summer. And I have to say, I'm incredibly pleased with all 3. Now, Sweet Peach and Nectar, probably my favorite because I love peach. Peach pie is my favorite pie. I love the smell of peach. But Surf and Sea Moss smells so fresh and so clean, and Midnight Jasmine and Sage, it's got this sort of sultry, sexy smell like a summer night. I just can't get enough of it. I also love the packaging. It's clean, it's simple. The scent is displayed on the top of each cap, and check this out. There's a little heart. There's a little heart engraved on the bar. I mean, if that doesn't make you feel happy when you're putting on your deodorant in the morning, I don't know what will. Native also offers toothpaste and body washes, and I will be straight up with you and say, once again, I know this is a sponsored ad, and some of you are going to be like, I don't believe you. These are my favorite body washes of all time. Forever. Whenever there's a limited seasonal scent that I love, I stock up on as many as possible. They lather beautifully to the point where I don't even need to use shaving cream. I would show you like footage of me in the shower and how beautifully they lather in this like creamy, thick lather, but that's inappropriate. The body washes are non-drying. My skin always feels hydrated afterwards, and the scents make my whole bathroom smell like a spa. In fact, every time I take a shower, my little 4-year-old Bella, she comes in the bathroom and she says, "Oh, it smells good in here." It's adorable. 3 deodorants are normally $36, but if you use my link in the description box and the code StephanieH9, you'll get them for $24. That's 33% off using my code StephanieH9. Best of all, which I'm really excited about because I'm going to use my own damn code, you get 20% off any body wash or toothpaste with StephanieH9. So I'm about to stock up again on the Surf and Sea Moss scent. The body wash, man. It's so good. I don't want to tell you what my favorite body wash was before because it's limited edition and they don't have it anymore, and I don't want to get you excited. No, actually, I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it because I want Native to make this a permanent body wash in their lineup. I don't want it to be seasonal anymore. Bring back the rosemary and lemon zest. Bring back that scent. Bring back that body wash. I will buy every single one you have. It is my absolute favorite. Native, please do it. Tell Native in the comments, bring back rosemary and lemon zest permanently. But until then, Surf and Sea Moss. will be my go-to summer scent. Thank you so much to Native for sponsoring this video. I love you guys so much. I love Native. Thank you guys for watching, the sponsor. Go check out Native. Click the link in the description box. Get yourself some of these amazing products. Body washes, deodorant, the sunscreen's great. The toothpaste is amazing. I just love Native. Thank you guys so much, and let's dive into the video. Okay, so Morgan Chantel Nick was born on September 12th, 1988, to her parents, Colleen and John Nick. About 3 years later, she would be followed by two younger siblings, her brother Logan, who at the time of her disappearance was 3.5, and her baby sister Taryn, who was just 22 months old when her big sister vanished. Morgan grew up in the small town of Ozark, Arkansas, a picturesque area surrounded by breathtaking views of mountains, rivers, forests, and lakes. This area is very gorgeous, lots of natural beauty, just really nice natural landscapes, small town feel. Morgan's mother, Colleen, remembers that her oldest daughter was a quiet girl, shy around strangers, but really funny and friendly and open with people that she knew and trusted. In many ways, Morgan was like most other little girls. She loved animals, especially cats. She had this kitten that she adopted from a shelter, and I guess they just kind of became like soul twins, and the kitten would sleep in bed with her every single night since the day Morgan brought this little cat home. Colleen Nick said, quote, "She was a Girl Scout. She thinks bubblegum is a food group, and she didn't like to run and play outside because it made her sweat. When she grew up, she always said she wanted to be a circus performer and a doctor," end quote. I feel Morgan on all of this. I also think bubblegum is a food group. I can't tell you the amount of times that I reach my hand in the bubblegum jar. We also have a bubblegum machine and a bubblegum jar, and I just am chewing bubblegum all day long. It's probably terrible for my teeth, but I love it. And I also don't really like to sweat too much. Now, the story of how Morgan Nick ended up joining the Girl Scouts is actually really funny and cute. Her friends had convinced her to join the track and field team when she was in the first grade, and so she did it. She wanted to hang out with her friends. But after one practice, Morgan ended her track and field career forever. She told her mother that she had no idea running would make her sweat so much, and she would rather be a Girl Scout so she could stay inside and work on arts and crafts projects. And Morgan really loved being a part of the Girl Scouts. In fact, she was wearing her bright green Girl Scouts t-shirt on the evening that she went missing. And Morgan did love doing arts and crafts. Her kindergarten teacher, Jerry Emmerich, still has this little handmade ornament that Morgan made for her. It was a little token of appreciation from the heart of a small child with dried hot glue oozing off the sides of it. 6 months before Morgan's disappearance, her parents had gotten a divorce, but it's reported that it wasn't an ugly divorce. They were still on good terms, and there were no ongoing custody battles. For the most part, Morgan was a happy 6-year-old who was just starting to learn to read, and she enjoyed practicing her reading skills by reading to her little brother at night when he would go to bed and ask for bedtime stories. And that little anecdote was a very hard thing for me to read because we do relate ourselves as we're listening to these stories to the people in them. And this is exactly what my oldest son, my only son, would do for little Bella, my youngest daughter. When he was starting to learn to read, he would just read to her bedtime stories, and he would read them over and over again because he was trying to get familiar with the stories, and she loved it. The day Morgan went missing was June 9th, 1995. It was a hot and humid Friday, and by all accounts, it was a day like any other. Colleen was at home with her 3 kids. They made grilled cheese for dinner, and then she and Morgan headed out to Alma, Arkansas. This is a town about 30 minutes from Ozark.
We actually lived in Ozark, Arkansas, which is about 30 miles away from the town of Alma, and we had been invited by our friends to come and watch their children play in a Little League baseball game.
Colleen Nick and her 6-year-old daughter Morgan had never been to Alma's tiny baseball field before that day.
Colleen would usually not have made this long drive so late on a Friday. She'd never even been to Alma before, but some friends had invited her to a Little League game, and she'd accepted. Leaving her 2 younger children at home with their grandmother, Colleen chose to bring Morgan because they hadn't had the opportunity to spend a lot of time alone together, kind of like a little girls' day, especially after the births of Morgan's younger siblings. And this is also super relatable as somebody who has an older daughter who's significantly older than her 2 younger siblings. as each new baby comes, there's just less time for each of them, and you feel guilty and you want to take time and make time to devote to each of your children so they feel special and loved. Now, the Little League game was a late one. It started at 9 p.m., and since Colleen had never made the drive before, she and Morgan left a little early to make sure they wouldn't be late. Alma, Arkansas is a small town. It's just a little bit bigger than Ozark. It's known to be the spinach capital of the world, and this notoriety is marked by many statues of Popeye, the Sailor Man, but there's a big fountain in town that showcases a bronze statue of Popeye, and the whole reason why this is considered the spinach capital of the world is because the Allen Canning Company, which is based in Alma, they can at least half of the United States spinach, so the town really leaned into the whole spinach thing.
Alma, Arkansas. The little town just east of Fort Smith was once known as the spinach capital of the world. In 1995, the small community with a great school system and low crime rate was a big draw for families. It was a place where no one expected evil.
There would be some 300 people at this Little League game, and when Colleen pulled into the parking lot next to the park where the game was taking place, the stands were already full and bustling with people who were laughing, chatting, and, getting ready to spectate one of America's favorite pastimes, Little League. Colleen and Morgan made their way through the bleachers to find Colleen's friends. They sat down. Morgan was dressed in her Girl Scouts shirt, jean shorts, and white tennis shoes, and she soon grew bored with the game and started a game of her own, untying her mother's shoes. Every time Colleen retied her shoes, Morgan untied them again with a devilish grin, and this went on for about 90 minutes. But then 2 kids that Morgan knew approached her and asked if she wanted to play with them. They were going to go into the parking lot and kind of go up a small hill that sloped up behind the stands and catch fireflies. And if anything says childhood summertime memories to me, it's catching fireflies. These 2 children were 8-year-old Jessica and 10-year-old Ty. Ty's sister was playing in the game that night. Morgan asked her mother if she could go play with them, but Colleen was hesitant at first because she wasn't familiar with the area. Neither was Morgan.
Just yards away from the game, little Morgan played with 2 friends, Jessica and Ty, who were 8 and 10 years old. Now, for the first time in 20 years, they return to Alma and talk openly about what happened that night.
It was my sister's baseball game, so it was kind of like a thing. Everybody, if you were a kid and you're at the baseball field, you always went up to the top of the hill.
And I remember us playing together and being up on we were a hill behind everybody and we were catching fireflies, just running around playing in the dirt, just laughing and yelling and playing.
They asked her if she wanted to go catch fireflies with them.
It was already late, so it was getting dark very quickly, but the parents and her friends sitting around her in the stands, they said, don't worry, kids play in the park and in that parking lot all the time. It's completely safe. So Morgan begged. The other parents were like, don't worry, don't be so overprotective. And Colleen gave in and told Morgan that she could play with her friends. Side note, if as a parent or the caretaker of a small child, if your gut tells you, I don't feel right about this, I don't feel good about this, don't let the people around you convince you that you're being overprotective, because you know what's best for your child. Later, recalling this moment, Colleen said, quote, she threw her arms around my neck, kissed my cheek. Then the kids all ran out to the parking lot. I could turn my head and see that she was right there in sight. I checked on them 3 or 4 times, end quote. It was around 10:30 p.m. when Morgan ran off, laughing with the other children, and shortly afterward, I believe just 15 minutes later, the game ended and Colleen focused her attention on the field as the Little League team walked towards the bleachers to greet their parents. She'd taken her eyes off of Morgan for just a few moments, and when she looked back, she could see the kids walking through the parking lot, headed in her direction towards the stands. But there were only 2 little figures walking back to the bleachers, and neither of them was Morgan. It was only 15 minutes. 15 minutes since Morgan had thrown her arms around her mother's neck and kissed her cheek. Colleen could probably still feel the little, electric tingle of love on her skin where her daughter had blessed her with that kiss. If you have kids who grace you with kisses and hugs, you'll know exactly what I mean. But 15 minutes, and everything changed. So Colleen's obviously worried at this point right away. She ran out to meet Jessica and Ty. She asked them where Morgan was. Colleen said that the kids didn't seem alarmed or worried at all. They simply told her that they'd been playing, and then they'd all stopped next to Colleen's Nissan in the parking lot to empty sand out of their shoes. Jessica and Ty had been leaning against the front end of the car while they turned their shoes upside down, and Morgan had been leaning against the back end. They said that when they'd started walking away and Morgan didn't follow, they assumed that she was just planning to wait by the car for her mother, since it was Colleen's car and the game was over and they'd be going home.
We had been playing in the sand, and we had it in all of our shoes and everything, so we went to the car to dump out all the sand, and Jessica and I sat on the front of the car, and Morgan was on the back of the car.
From where this conversation took place, Colleen could see her car, but Morgan was not standing next to it, waiting to jump in and drive home, safe and sound. Morgan was nowhere to be seen. Colleen said, quote, "Already, when I couldn't see Morgan, my heart started to beat really fast. We were somewhere we hadn't been before. She wouldn't go anywhere by herself, and there wasn't even anywhere to go. There was no concession stand, no bathrooms," end quote. Years later, Colleen remembered the panic that set in as she saw people, attendees of this game, get in their cars and drive away. She remembered thinking that she wished everyone would just stop, that time would freeze, so she could gather her thoughts and scan the parking lot and locate her 6-year-old daughter. And I gotta tell you, if I was her, I would have gotten on top of my car and I would have waved my arms and been like, "Everybody stop, nobody leave this parking lot. My daughter's missing, and now one of you bitches is getting in your car until I find her. All right. But in that moment, people don't think about that. In that moment when your kid's missing and that squeezing happens in your heart and that rock happens in your stomach, and this has happened to me where I'll lose sight of my kids for a minute and I'm just freaking out. You're also thinking, I'm freaking out, I think something's wrong, but you're like, what if she's fine? What if she's just right over there and I make this big scene for nothing? Now, none of the adults at the Little League game had seen anything that night, but Jessica and Ty told Colleen that while they'd been playing with Morgan, they'd noticed a man leaning against a red pickup truck. He was leaning against the front end of the truck, and he kind of had his arms folded, and he was facing the field as if he was watching the game. But the kids noticed him watching them from time to time, and he even spoke to them at one point in what they described as a hillbilly-type accent. Unfortunately, the kids could not remember exactly what he had said to them. They were kids, they're 8 and 10.
I remember seeing somebody sitting up on the hill, leaning on his truck, and I remember that he did say stuff to us, but I don't remember specifically what.
The truck was an old red Ford pickup truck with a white camper shell in the back, and the camper shell appeared to be 4 inches too short for the truck, meaning that the shell was shorter than the bed, which isn't usual when you have a camper shell on the truck. You kind of want to have more space in it. That's the point of the camper shell, which really freaks me out a little bit because I think that camper shell in his truck was not to store things in or keep them safe from, rain and the elements. I think it was for children that he wanted to kidnap so that he could put them in there and nobody would see them. It was also reported that the back of the camper shell, the white camper shell, had possible damage to it. The truck itself had a short wheelbase, and I believe this means that there's a lot of space between the wheel part of the car and then the tire itself. The truck also had dull, old-looking paint. The license plates may have been Arkansas plates, but the kids couldn't be sure. The man himself was described as being white, about 6 foot tall, 180 pounds, with medium build and dark, slicked-back salt and pepper hair. He also had a mustache and a short beard, which was about 1 inch thick. He'd been wearing only a pair of cut-off jeans, and he had a hairy chest. After hearing this, someone on the scene called the police, and 6 minutes later, law enforcement was at the park talking to Jessica and Ty, getting their statements and a description of the man and the truck, who had both disappeared at the same time as Morgan Nick.
When 6-year-old Morgan Nick was abducted from an Alma ballpark in 1995, police officers hit the streets knowing time was everything.
Whoever has her, please don't hurt her.
4029 News was there at every newscast to bring you the latest updates, but minutes turned into days.
Now, it's worth noting this man's age is reported differently depending on where you look. Sometimes he's reported to being, anywhere between 23 and 27 years old. Sometimes they give an even bigger range, 23 to 33. But, in general, I think the general consensus is probably mid-20s. Now, as hard as it is to believe, the eyewitness statements from 2 children would be the most solid lead that law enforcement would really ever have to go on. That night, Colleen went to the Alma police station where she called her ex-husband to let him know what had happened, and there she stayed for the next 6 weeks. Colleen stayed in Alma, refusing to leave, taking up residence at the volunteer fire station right across the street from the police station, and this became the unofficial base for, the efforts to find Morgan.
I remember standing outside the fire station on the 4th day and somebody saying to me, "Well, it's only been 4 days." And thinking that was helpful.
The investigation started immediately. Detectives interviewed Morgan's family and friends, as well as the 300 people who'd been at the game that night. Within a few days, the FBI and the Arkansas State Police were brought in to help, and they, along with dozens of volunteers, began a massive search for Morgan Nick. There were people searching on foot, by air, on horseback, but no sign of Morgan or her abductor were found. The town of Alma was transformed, with pink ribbons tied everywhere to remind people that Morgan was still missing, along with posters featuring Morgan's face, along with a composite sketch of the man police believed had taken her. At first, Alma Police Chief Jeff Pointer felt that the young girl had probably just wandered off and gotten lost. He said, quote, "The main thing I remember is thinking she would be back home the next morning," end quote. But as police reports from Alma and surrounding areas came in concerning other attempted child abductions, the situation began to seem more grave. Earlier that same day, a mother had called the police to report that a man driving a red truck had attempted to lure her 4-year-old daughter into his vehicle outside a laundromat in Alma. The description she gave of the man matched the description given by Jessica and Ty of Morgan's possible abductor. The day after Morgan went missing on June 10th, another report came in from Fort Smith, Arkansas. That's just about 15 miles away from Alma. An eyewitness reported seeing a man attempting to kidnap a 9-year-old girl. He was apparently trying to lure her into a bathroom, and once again, the description of this man matched the description of Morgan's abductor. This led the police and the FBI to the chilling theory that Morgan may have fallen victim to a professional kidnapper, a person who basically drives around looking for children to snatch and then sell, aka human trafficking, which is a big, widespread problem. This is not a conspiracy theory. Don't let those QAnon people fool you into thinking that this is a conspiracy theory. Human trafficking is real. It happens all over the world. It happens in America. This isn't an overseas third world country problem, as some people like to comfort themselves into thinking. This happens in every city, every state, every small town in America. So be vigilant. According to the website ualr.edu, Arkansas is a poverty-stricken state, and they rank among the 5 states with the highest poverty rates in the country. And as we know, socioeconomic status can place a target on potential trafficking victims. Those suffering from poverty are purposely targeted by traffickers. Just last year, 13 people were arrested in New Orleans following an underage sex trafficking operation in northeast Arkansas. And since 2007, there have been 180 reported cases of human trafficking in the state. And as we know, the amount of reported cases is dwarfed by the amount of actual cases, so it's most likely 3 times that much. The way that Morgan had vanished with her abductor without a trace, the careful way he'd been watching the children play, how he'd attempted to engage with them, lull them into a false sense of security, convince them that he was a friend, not a stranger, it gave law enforcement the impression that maybe this individual had done this before. After Morgan was taken, the days stretched into weeks with no sign of her, and the community of Alma closed ranks around Colleen, who had previously been a stranger but now was one of their own. Meanwhile, detectives were searching the area where Morgan had gone missing. They were collecting home videos from nearby residents. They were collecting anything they could find, like cigarette butts and empty bottles, even if they had no clue whether or not these things were tied to Morgan Nick. Chief Russell White of the Alma PD said, quote, "We have tons of DNA from those items, but we don't know if any of them are our suspect. We've had probably dozens of leads that we got excited about, but as we investigate them, we realized that those people couldn't have possibly done it. I can't tell you how many dogs we've deployed, wells that we've searched, holes that we've dug. None of them have panned out, and it's disappointing, but pretty normal for a case like this," end quote. Now let's talk about some of those leads. Within the first few weeks, hundreds of people called in tips claiming to have seen the suspect's red truck. All 247 reports were followed up on in Arkansas, in Oklahoma, even in Texas, but they led to nothing. 2 weeks after Morgan disappeared, a man named Albert Harvey from Stuttgart, Arkansas, called Alma police and told them that he'd been working in his garden on a Saturday morning when he witnessed a man attempting to break into his truck. When the man saw Albert watching him, he immediately ran away, but he was dragging a little blonde girl behind him by her arm. And the last time Albert saw them, they were running away from him through a field. So he was obviously brought in for questioning. He was shown a composite sketch of the suspect, as well as a picture of Morgan Nick. And Albert swore up and down that this man was the same one who'd been trying to break into his vehicle. And Morgan was the very same little blonde girl who'd been with him. Alma law enforcement felt that this could be the break in the case that they'd been waiting for. And when Morgan's parents heard about the sighting, they booked a private plane to fly them right to Stuttgart, which is about 200 miles away from Alma, so that they could be there when their daughter was rescued, so that they could gather her in their arms and make sure that she got back home safe. An immediate law enforcement presence also descended on Stuttgart, and a 6-square-mile area was blocked off so that police, along with helicopters from the National Guard and sniffer dogs, could search for the man and his tiny blonde captive. Tulsa World reported that at one point infrared light was used to search the thick underbrush and the thickets, also to search surrounding rice fields, cotton fields, and bayous. Albert had called the tip-in on a Saturday, and that same day the search began, but it was hot and humid that day. It was in the high 90s. The mosquitoes were rampant, attacking the searchers as they picked through these wild and swampy areas. Law enforcement, volunteers from the area, and police dogs searched for Morgan for 16 hours that day, despite the very uncomfortable conditions. But they found nothing. Local police began to grow suspicious of Albert's story. They brought him in for questioning again, and they gave him 2 polygraph tests, both of which he failed. Albert still stuck to his story before eventually breaking down and admitting that he'd made the whole thing up. Well, almost the whole thing. Albert said he had seen a guy trying to break into his truck, but he hadn't seen the man's face, and there was never a little blonde girl. Now that I'm saying this, this sounds horrible. I always think it's horrible to give a false report to the police, and I hate it. You guys know that, but I would have checked into Albert a little bit more, maybe searched his house, maybe searched his property, because this guy was trying to call unneeded and unnecessary attention to him for what? And we know that sometimes these kidnappers and these murderers, they like to kind of taunt the police and get this close to being caught and kind of leave little tips and breadcrumb trails because they don't want people to stop talking about them. I don't know, but I would have looked into Albert a little bit more. I hope they did. Arkansas State Police Lieutenant Dale Best, who is in charge of this investigation at this point, he said, quote, "This was a full-scale search. It cost thousands upon thousands of dollars, and more importantly, it cost us resources that you can't put a dollar value on," end quote. Not to mention the incredible disappointment that Colleen and John Nick faced when they traveled there, hoping they would leave Stuttgart with their daughter, but only to find that it was just a completely false report, and you were just chasing a ghost. Albert Harvey was arrested and charged with filing a false police report, and his explanation as to why he had done this was pretty underwhelming, to say the least. Albert said, quote, "I had got a little bit too carried away. I'm sorry, y'all, to cause this confusion. I have wasted your time with mosquitoes and stuff all out here," end quote. Albert really thought that the mosquitoes were the biggest issue here, huh? He really, really did. After this, a crew of 17 additional Arkansas State police officers were sent to Alma for a week. With the 8 investigators that were already working the case, it brought the whole task force to 25 people. They started going through the over 1,500 tips that the Alma Police Department had received. At the end of the following week, Lieutenant Best met with representatives from other counties in Arkansas to arrange a door-to-door search of all residents that had a red pickup truck listed as being a vehicle that belonged to someone in the home. But as the weeks passed, the investigation stalled. Morgan's little brother Logan had cried when his parents had told him that his sister was gone, and he was upset with his mother for losing Morgan. He insisted that Colleen go and pick up his sister immediately. Little Logan worried that the people who had Morgan were not being nice to her. Maybe they were yelling at her all the time. and refusing to bring her out for pizza. Bless his heart. In 1996, Colleen Nick started the Morgan Nick Foundation, which was mainly focused on finding Morgan and keeping her memory alive, but it was also focused on finding other missing children, and it lobbied for changes in how missing children cases would be handled, and also the foundation worked to enact laws geared towards child safety. The foundation now works to educate children about the dangers of child abduction and to provide a support system for parents of other missing children. The website claims that the foundation's main objectives are intervention, education, and legislation, which are three important legs to making real changes to protect children from abduction. You have to let children know that there's people out there who want to take them. So many parents try to protect their children from the evil in the world. And I get that. I'm not saying go out and start telling them serial killer stories, but let them know that not everyone out there is good. There's people out there who might mean to do them harm, and once that person has them, it will be very difficult for you as their parent to find them. You'll do everything you can. You'll walk to the ends of the earth to find them. You'll never stop fighting. But these bad people have bad methods of keeping your child from you. So you got to let your kids know this so that they're also aware. They're also vigilant when they're out and about and they're paying attention. Every time Bella leaves to go with her father or her grandparents somewhere, I tell her, be vigilant. And now she knows what that means and she laughs about it, but she has become more aware of her surroundings. Just educate your kids on the fact that there are some shitty people out there. In January of 2001, the police released an updated composite sketch of the man who is believed to have taken Morgan Nick. In the following February, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released an age progression photo of Morgan, showing what she would look like at the age of 12. In August of the same year, Morgan's story was featured on the television program Unsolved Mysteries. Later, she was also featured on Nancy Grace's program, so there has been some media coverage of this. And in 2002, a tip brought police to Logan County, Arkansas, where they searched a property there with police dogs. They also dug around the property, but they found nothing. Now, law enforcement has not released information about this Logan County tip at all. They haven't said where it came from or who they were looking into or what the tip was. So I think that this tip is actually a little bit more important than that the media is being able to report, just because the police have been so tight-lipped about it, which leads me to believe that there's something more to it, and they don't want to compromise the investigation by releasing too much information. In 2010, the FBI searched a vacant home in Spiro, Oklahoma. Now, this is part of the Fort Smith, Arkansas, Oklahoma metropolitan area, so it's in Oklahoma, but it's really close to the Arkansas border. The home had previously been occupied by a man who, at the time of the search, was in jail for child molestation. Investigators went into the home and collected items to see if they could find DNA that connected the resident who was in jail to Morgan Nick, but once again, they found nothing. So at this point, they just had a warrant to search inside the house. And what I believe happened with this tip is that it came from a CI, so a criminal informant, maybe somebody who was in jail with this child molester. Maybe this person in jail made some sort of admission that he had something to do with what happened to Morgan Nick. Law enforcement returned to this same residence in December of 2017. This time they said it was an unrelated case, so it wasn't the Morgan Nick case. It was a different case, probably another child abduction. And this time they had a warrant for the whole property, so they focused on digging around the property and searching in a well that was located on the property. Now, apparently a cadaver dog had given a hit on this land, but after a full day of digging, they once again found nothing.
Well, good evening, Alicia. Crews have spent the better part of this afternoon filling in the hole in this backyard they've been digging since Monday. That dig for evidence, acting on information unrelated to the Morgan Nick case, but on a property that investigators had searched nearly 7 years ago in relation to Morgan Nick's disappearance. Agents with the FBI, Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, local law enforcement, as well as investigators from Arkansas were on scene in Spiro, Oklahoma, Tuesday. Authorities here searching a property searched in the Morgan Nick case back in 2010.
It's not a cold case. A lot of people refer to it. It's an old case, but not cold. We still get leads all the time on it. We're working them constantly.
When officials initially searched this property, authorities only had a search warrant for a home on the property, that home belonging to a person of interest in the Morgan Nick case since the investigation started back in 1995. The home no longer exists, and the person of interest is currently incarcerated.
We've never been able to tie him directly to it, and we've never been able to clear him from it.
Crews were reportedly searching for a well on the property in relation to another investigation.
That dig was done about an inch or two at a time with the soil drug back, and then that way the forensic pathologist from the state medical examiner's office could thoroughly look at everything that was being moved.
They dug roughly 2 feet before hitting bedrock. No well and no Morgan Nick.
Now, law enforcement on this case, they're still working on it. Just recently, they've made comments to say that it's still an open case. They have active people working on it. But they've also made comments about how they have had a lead that they continue to kind of go back to and sort of revisit. Whether it's the Logan County lead or the Spiro lead, I believe that they feel that somebody involved with these locations had something to do with what happened to Morgan, and maybe now they're just trying to find something to tie him to Morgan to be sure. And I believe that there was an interview with a police officer, I forget what his name was, but he said, we haven't been able to connect him to Morgan, but we haven't been able to not connect him to Morgan. Now, just this past spring, a documentary about Morgan's case aired on Channel 5. It's a local news network, and then across the state of Arkansas. I wish that we could see it, but we can't. I really think that if they want to get this word out, they should put it on YouTube. They should put it somewhere like Vimeo or whatever that's called, Vivo, whatever, so that the documentary can be shared on like the Morgan Nick Foundation's page so we can see it, so we can share it, so we can get the word out. Apparently they did basically like a recreation of what happened that night. They talk about the red truck. I feel like it would be really good if more people could see it outside of Arkansas. So if anybody knows where I can find it, I would greatly appreciate it.
After a new documentary aired first right here on Channel 5 and then across the state, hundreds of new leads have poured in about the disappearance of Morgan Nick. On Wednesday, it'll be 26 years since she went missing in Alma. And new tonight, 5 News reporter Michael Wilson spoke with her mom, Colleen. She shares how she's feeling days before the 26th anniversary of her daughter's disappearance.
Colleen Nick wants her daughter to know she'll never stop looking for her.
Our family is still as committed 26 years later to finding Morgan and bringing her home as we were the very first day that she was missing.
And in the fight to bring her home, a documentary was created, airing exclusively on 5 News. Still Missing Morgan shows exactly what happened on the night of June 6, 1995.
Once it aired, we had more than 200 leads come in.
To the community hoping to find Morgan, the Alma Police Department is now looking for the driver of this red truck. Police say it could be linked to Morgan's disappearance, and they want to know who was behind the wheel the night that Morgan was abducted. Today, Morgan would be 32 years old, and this is what Morgan would look like.
We still fight for her because she is someone who is worth fighting for.
Now, this film brought in hundreds of new tips and leads, and in this documentary, they showed a picture of a red truck with a white camper shell, a picture that apparently was taken at the ballpark that night. So this seems to be the actual truck that police and law enforcement believe was carrying the person who took Morgan Nick. Law enforcement have asked for the public to dig deeper, to remember anything they can about the night Morgan disappeared or about a red truck and who may have driven it. Like I said, police say that the investigation into Morgan's disappearance is still active and ongoing. The Alma police chief said, quote, "We're always trying new approaches, getting fresh eyes on the case, but not a lot has changed in what we know. With a case this age, there's a lot of misinformation, things that waste our resources. The person who did this was somebody who was a loner by nature, not a lot of friends or family. He committed the crime and probably did not even tell anyone. That's the hardest part about this," end quote. So I feel like the general consensus about this case is that Morgan was taken by somebody she didn't know. But Morgan's kindergarten teacher, we talked about earlier, that's the one that Morgan made the ornament from, she said something that was, telling to me. She said Morgan wouldn't feel comfortable around strangers. Like, Morgan would not go off with a stranger. She was always very shy. Whenever we'd go on field trips, she stayed right by me. She was glued to my side. She would never wander off. She wouldn't talk to strangers. I don't think she would go with a stranger. Now, that doesn't really do anything for us if this guy just kind of snatched her while she was sitting by the car emptying sand out of her shoes. If he just pulled up in the truck, grabbed her, threw her in the back, and went away. Obviously, at that point, she wouldn't have a choice about whether she would willingly go with this person or not. Now, both of Morgan's parents were cleared very early on in the investigation because, as we know, the majority of child abduction cases are committed by someone who knows the child, usually a family member or close friend. So those were the first people that police were going to interview. Now, there is speculation online that Morgan's father, John, could be involved. And I don't really believe this to be true. I don't want this to be true, but I do want to tell you about it. I want to tell you about the theory and explain to you that it is simply that, a theory, because I know if I don't, there's going to be people who follow this case who accuse me of being biased and like leaving it out on purpose and like favoring the parents and not doing the deep investigation work that I say I do. So I have to include it. And I think it's interesting. I think it's food for thought. I think it's something that we can talk about and speculate about, but, it's a slippery slope. So I found an article on a website called Today in Fort Smith, and it's titled, "Looking for Morgan. Do Court Records Tell a Chilling Tale About a Felon with Access to a Missing Girl?" And it was written in May of this year, I believe. So the author starts with giving some statistics. According to the Polly Klaas Foundation, 99.8% of the children kidnapped each year come home. This is really great. Great statistics. That's actually very comforting, I think. The statistics go on to say that only about 100 children are kidnapped by these stereotypical stranger abductions. Usually it's from someone that they know. The person who wrote the article claims that after extensive research, they've come to the conclusion that Morgan may have known her kidnapper. They said that when they were looking into Morgan's father, John, whose full name is evidently Morris John Nick, they came across the name of another individual named Clifford Joe Pullen, who was a 2-time Purple Heart winner after serving in both the Vietnam and Korean Wars. Now, apparently, this guy, Pullen, sold marijuana, and in an Arkansas Court of Appeals document, a link was found between him and Morgan Nick's father, allegedly. The document said that on January 28, 2006, Pullen was arrested for delivery of marijuana. The arrest was the culmination of an operation conducted by the 21st Judicial District Drug Task Force, undertaken to determine whether Pullen was the supplier for a lower-level drug dealer named John Nick. So I'm going to read directly from this article to continue because I want to read it in their words. And I want to read it in their words, not just so you don't think that they're my words, but also because it is well written. It appears to be well researched. And I will link the article in the description box so you can kind of peruse it yourself, fact check it if you want. It was very hard to fact check for me because I don't have access to these documents and to, I guess, like the resources that this author had. Oh, actually, I lied. The author says you can access the information here. Let me click it and see if it brings me to, page not found. So I don't know what you think about that. But it does look like this link at some point did lead to a legitimate site called Justia US Law, which is where I do sometimes find cases and documents and stuff like that. So who knows? All right, so the author says, quote, "You read that right. Morgan Nick's father, Morris John Nick, was suspected of being a drug dealer. The document goes on to explain, prior to the start of the operation, a confidential informant who had made 3 marijuana purchases from Nick told the drug task force that Nick claimed that Pullen was his supplier. In December 2005, the task force had arrested Pullen for drug trafficking the previous summer. On the day in question, the drug task force set up surveillance on Pullen's residence. Drug task force investigators sent the CI to Nick's residence to purchase marijuana with marked currency. The CI had been given approximately $2,000 so that he could buy all of Nick's existing stock of marijuana. Nick sold him 8 ounces of marijuana for $640. Damn. As it turns out, Morris John Nick has a long criminal history. July 1987, battery, 3rd degree. July 1987, legacy system criminal violation. July 1987, criminal mischief, 2nd degree. January 2006, possession, controlled counterfeit substance, 3rd offense, Class C felony. And it looks like there's 2 counts of that. Then we have January 2006, drugs and firearms, simultaneous possession. January 2006, possess, use, deliver, advertise drug paraphernalia. January 2006, endangering the welfare of a minor, second degree. The charge of endangering the welfare of a minor in the second degree was not prosecuted in the 1996 proceedings, possibly as part of a plea deal. John Nick's drug charges happened 11 years after Morgan's abduction, so what makes this information relevant? Good question. According to sources, which they do not list, John Nick had a long history with drugs dating back to the early 1990s, prior to his divorce from Colleen Nick and prior to the abduction of Morgan Nick. Even more disturbing is this fact from the 2006 Arkansas Court of Appeals document, quote, Pullen drove directly to Nick's residence and he entered without knocking. Pullen only stayed inside a few minutes before leaving without the package, end quote. In 2006, was it commonplace for people such as Clifford Pullen with the intent of buying or selling drugs to enter the home of John Nick without even knocking? Did John Nick keep this same kind of open door policy when he lived with his children? If Morris John Nick had a long-standing business relationship with Clifford Joe Pullen going back to the 90s, I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that Pullen not only frequented the Nick home, but that he most likely was very familiar with John Nick's family and his children. Why do I think this could be important? Another good question. In July of 1995, Clifford Joe Pullen was found guilty of a heinous crime, violation of a minor in the first degree. Let this sink in. A drug dealer that possibly had full access to John Nick's home and his children was found guilty of a sex crime against a child. Pullen was charged with this crime 1 month after Morgan Nick disappeared. That is true. That is something that might be a red flag. Let's put this in perspective. According to research, an average child predator will offend 200 to 400 times before being caught if they are ever caught. What? Pullen was caught 1 month after Morgan's abduction. How many times did he offend prior to being caught, and who were the possible victims? My blood ran cold when I came across this post about Clifford Joe Pullen on September 9th, 2013. A man named Rick posted this. Quote, he, Pullen, was convicted of sexual indecency with a minor and given a suspended sentence. He had a long history of trading drugs for sex with underage girls. He was then convicted of selling pot. He was out of jail awaiting sentence when he was arrested again with heavy drugs, including heroin, end quote. Could it be possible that Morgan Nick and her siblings were exposed to a dangerous world of drugs and predators? Is it possible that a predator set his eyes on Morgan Nick while purchasing or supplying drugs to her father? I believe this is a plausible scenario based on the information that is found in public criminal court records. Clifford Joe Pullen is a testament to a life gone bad and should be a cautionary tale to those involved in drugs. Thanks. Not only had he been a war hero who volunteered to go to Vietnam after a tour in Korea, but he went on to work for and retired from the United States Postal Service after his military career. Starting in 1995 with his conviction for sexual indecency with a minor that triggered parole revocations for previous crimes and for which he served no time, save 6 months, on a related harassment charge, Pullen was convicted of 8 felonies and 2 criminal misdemeanors in the next 13 years. He was also found guilty of his last drug-related crimes at the age of 80 and sentenced to 30 years in prison. He died at the age of 88 in a Little Rock hospital. So clearly he was no saint despite his honorable service to the country, and he was not the kind of person I would want around my children. I'm not placing blame on John Nick or on Morgan's family for her abduction. Well, that's good. I was worried about that. I'm simply pointing out a narrative that it seems to have been avoided, at least on a public platform. So I'm not avoiding it on a public platform. I am bringing it to light because I think that people are responsible enough, for the most part, not everyone, but I think most adults are responsible enough and smart enough to hear things that may be inflammatory and may have, some truth to them or some mistruths to them, and then kind of use critical thinking and use their own resources of their brain and their little fingers to, Google things and check on the internet to kind of figure out whether they believe it could be possible or enough. But let's look at a picture of this guy, Pullen. What I'm curious about is if he is the same height, the same age. I feel like he probably wouldn't be the same age because there was another dude I found in Logan County who looked just like the picture, the composite sketch of Morgan's kidnapper. I almost talked about it in this video, even though his age didn't match up, because what we have is eyewitnesses who are 2 children. They see a guy, they think he might be about this age, but children don't have great judgment when it comes to the ages of adults. Like when I was 8 and 10, I thought my brother, who is 10 years older than me, was like really old. but he obviously wasn't. He wasn't even like 20 yet. So they just don't have the best. And the description said he had salt and pepper hair. And I know it's possible for some people in like their mid-20s to go gray prematurely, but it's not super common. So Morgan's kidnapper could definitely have been older than everybody's been thinking. So I am just going to kind of look him up and see if I can find out anything like about him, how tall he was, because that's something that I don't feel like the kids would mess up. Like if he was tall, 6 foot, then he was tall, even his body type, stuff like that. So here is his obituary. It says, obituary for Clifford Joe Pullen, retired MSG Clifford Joe Pullen, 86, of Alma, Arkansas. So he lived in Alma. Passed away on Friday, January 2nd, 2015 at the Baptist Medical Center in Little Rock after a brief illness. He retired from the Army after 22 years of service. During those 22 years, he received 2 Purple Hearts. He then went on to work as a letter carrier for the Van Buren Post Office, where he retired after 24 years of service. He was born on May 21st, 1928 in Cleo Springs, Oklahoma, to the late Everett and Ida Pullen. According to the kids and what they saw, if this guy was in his mid-20s or even like in his mid-30s, I don't see how it could be the same person unless he sent somebody else there to do it. So it's a cool connection. It's like food for thought. Like I said, it's something to kind of chew on, but I don't know how much there is to it. Because if he was born in 1928 and Morgan was taken in 1995, 67 years old. And I mean, unless he aged well and he still felt comfortable rocking like a bare hairy chest with cut off jeans, I don't see how it could be possible. I mean, he would have been like all white by then. But once again, I don't know. Maybe he was one of those lucky people that just kept his color and he just went sort of salt and pepper, like Pierce Brosnan. I do see some things, though, on different message boards, like Lynch at Large. It's a blog about somebody who's like, oh, I'm into politics. I'm Pat Lynch. Welcome to my world. I don't know. I'm not going to go too much into that person, but there's a response underneath it that says, 80-year-old Arkansas war vet gets life for marijuana charge. I'm writing to condemn the outrageous acts of the Crawford County, Arkansas judicial system. My deceased father's best friend, an 80-year-old man, Clifford Joe Pullen of Alma, Arkansas, was sentenced to 30 years, then an additional 70 years in prison on marijuana charges. This is a nonviolent crime. Well, I mean, yeah, if that was the case, like if it was just marijuana charges, I agree with you. That's ridiculous. But from what we read in this other blog today in Fort Smith, it was charges of sexual violence against children or a child or minors. And then somebody else comments under this, Joe Pullen is a scumbag. He was convicted of sexual indecency with a minor and given a suspended sentence. He has a long history of trading drugs for sex with underage girls. He was then convicted of selling pot. He was out of jail awaiting sentence when he was arrested again with heavy drugs, including heroin. Either you don't know the facts or you are a liar. Supporting this scum in any way marks you as a low-life piece of crap. Whoa. And then somebody responds, my dad wasn't a scumbag. You're an effing scumbag, you piece of... You can post all the lies you want about my dad. Just know I know you and I'm pressing charges for your post. You don't know shit. You all can go to hell. Sincerely, Candace. And then somebody responded, hey, Candace, looks like your daddy is a scumbag. And then he posts a web sleuth. This is what I'm talking about. Like, these cases will bring you down a rabbit hole. He posts a web sleuth link, which I will also put in the description box. Oh, I got the document, though, because this link did work. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if the person who went on defending Joe Pullen was actually his daughter or just somebody pretending to be his daughter, or if his daughter maybe didn't know about the things he did. I'm not trying to offend anybody, obviously. I'm just saying what I see online. There is a very good chance that Joe Pullen's family knows way more than anybody online, and, they still want to think of their father in a good light. And for the record, there is nothing I can find that ties him to Morgan Nick. Like I said, I think the ages and the dates are way off. But like I said, food for thought, something to chew on. So that's going to be it for today. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comment section. I love to hear from you. I love discussing these cases from you. I'm in the comment section all the time talking to you guys, letting you know that I appreciate your support. I appreciate my Patreon support so much. We have such a great community over there. They get my videos early. They give me feedback on them. I really appreciate them, and they're like my besties. So I just wish I could interact with them more, which I'm going to start doing. But CrimeCon was crazy, and life has been crazy. I can't even get into it. It's private, but there's been a lot of stuff happening. And now I am going to go back out of my recording booth, which is nice and cool, into the extreme heat of today. And this is why my hair looks like this, by the way, because I couldn't even be bothered. I couldn't be bothered to blow dry it. I couldn't be bothered to straight iron it or put anything in it. Oh, it's just awful. I'm so sweaty. Good thing I'm wearing Native. And don't forget to check out Native. Link is in the description box. Use my code StephanieH9. Also, a friendly reminder that I have new merch designs in the merch store. Check them out. Link is in the description box. I really would like you guys to also check out the Morgan Nick Foundation. There's a lot of great resources on there that might help you figure out how to explain to your child that there's people out there who want to kidnap them, because that's a hard conversation. I've had it 3 times myself, and it's tough. Definitely tougher than the birds and the bees conversation, let me tell you. And I would really love if you would share this video, or if you don't want to share this video, because I don't want you to think I'm asking you to share the video, God forbid, but you can share Morgan's story through the Morgan Nick Foundation, which has her story on there. There's lots of great resources. Just get it out there, because, you know, at this point, obviously this is far more widespread than just Arkansas. But Morgan's mother, Colleen, has been a nonstop warrior for her, and I want to offer her any help that we can to get the story out and hopefully get some tips in and just solve this. Like I said, bring Morgan home one way or the other. Like this video if you liked it, share it if you think it's worth sharing. Don't forget to drop me a comment, and if you've subscribed already, make sure you still are subscribed, because YouTube loves to unsubscribe people from my channel. I don't know why, but I've stopped caring. I'm indifferent now. We're in that kind of like love-hate relationship place where we're just walking around the house like we're strangers to each other, you know, completely indifferent. Like YouTube, who is she? I don't know. And if you're not already subscribed and you've been here and watched a couple of videos, what are you waiting for? Go ahead, hit that subscribe button, join the community. Thank you so much for being here. Stay kind, stay beautiful. I'll see you very soon.
Straight down, and that river runs deep, the mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're coming back from the grave, calling out my name, better say I Hail Mary. Well, you don't know how deep it goes until it's getting you slowly. It's all you got to let it go. I got blood.